know today's topic is about anxiety. You might be wondering why I've called it Healing Pingu, but we'll get onto that topic very soon. I'm going to get straight into it. And what I really want to do today is dissect what anxiety is. So what it is, why it's happening, how it occurs, and how we can manage a lifestyle without it, or manage a lifestyle with it being reduced from the extreme to something very small, so it's not overpowering our day-to-day lives. Anxiety is something that a lot of people experience on a day-to-day, or it comes and goes in phases. Sometimes it's really extreme, sometimes it's quite minor. But what we need to get a grips of is why it's occurring, because in fact, it's actually something to do with our brain and the way that we're thinking. So we're going to tap into that a little bit later. What I want to start off with is why I've called it Pingu. So a few of you guys may have seen the previous calls where we've spoken about word associations. So the reason why I've replaced the word anxiety with Pingu is because Pingu is associated with something that's funny. So it's associated with humor. It gives me some funny memories about when I used to watch Pingu on TV. And it's a character that we can all laugh with. So initially, the aim that we're doing here is disconnecting from the anxiety word itself. When we think about the word, or when we say it, or when we talk about it, it can sometimes trigger you into thinking that you are anxious at that moment. So you're almost going back to those memories, and your body starts to think it's happening right there, right then. So by replacing the word anxiety with Pingu, it allows the brain to revert back to fun memories rather than the anxiety itself. And over time, the more you practice this word association, the better it is, the easier it becomes, and the less of the actual anxiety symptoms that you'll start to feel. So this is just one aspect of how we can learn how to manage it, and how we can learn how to disconnect from the word itself and the symptoms that come with it and the triggers that come with it. Okay, so have a little think about that for yourselves. Think about something, a character or a memory or someone, a name that you find quite funny. Maybe it was a conversation that you and a friend had, and maybe there was a word that you guys laughed about, and see how it fits in by replacing the word anxiety with your chosen word, so you can start managing that from here on now. Okay, so you don't need to go with Pingu. I find Pingu absolutely hilarious. I love Pingu's gibberish, and it's enabled me now to not even feel like I've ever had anxiety, because I now see a penguin in my head every time that I go to speak about being anxious. So as we know, when it comes to anxiety, there's many symptoms that people feel. Some are very extreme, some are minor, some last all day, some last a few hours. It really, really depends what is happening to the brain and why. Okay, so when we are anxious, our symptoms could be things like sweaty palms, our hearts are racing, we start getting shortness of breath, so tight chest, tight lungs. We might not be able to concentrate as best as we want to, start feeling stressed, start feeling the pressure, headaches, so many different symptoms that occur. But one of them being quite major, which is the heart racing. Okay, so why does anxiety happen? What is it? First, we need to look at it. Okay, so we need to learn how to disconnect from the actual word, from the actual symptoms, and not be the anxiety, but having to look at it. So what I'm doing here is I'm disconnecting myself from Pingu, and I'm going to observe Pingu in its form outside of my body. Okay, so why does anxiety, or why does Pingu occur? In order for the symptoms to arise in our bodies, it starts off in the brain. Okay, so our little brain here, what happens is it thinks of something, and that thought processes a reaction, and that reaction processes an emotion, and that emotion makes us feel something, which are the symptoms. Okay, so a lot of times what people tend to get into is, oh my God, I feel anxious. I don't know why this is happening. I just felt it all of a sudden. So our brain thinks about something that we may not be aware of at that specific time, or even at any time. And it causes that reaction, and it causes the physical symptoms of an emotion. Okay. So that thought that comes into our minds is lingering in our subconscious. So our subconscious is what actually runs 95% of our days. So if you think about how our subconscious works, we've got things like when we brush our teeth, when we drive, when we make our first coffee, whatever it is that's a routine of habit that we don't actually need our brains to engage and make decisions for in that moment, all of that is happening in our subconscious. So it's almost like we've got like a program deep within our thoughts of how to do things without actually thinking and doing anything. Okay, it just happens naturally. I don't know if you guys have ever experienced a situation where you're driving and, you know, your brain starts wandering somewhere else. And then 5 minutes, 10 minutes later, you kind of like shock yourself of like, how did I even get here? I don't even remember how I drove here. So that's your subconscious that's working. So your subconscious has driven you or made you end up in some place that you already know how to do it without actually being conscious about it. So 95% of our day is run through our subconscious, okay? 5% of our day is run by our conscious mind. So just 5%, which is terrible for most of us. So as an example, when you are conscious, you are usually, this happens when you're making decisions, when you're lost and you need to figure out a plan of how to get back on track. If you're driving and you don't know what to do, you need to check your sat nav. All of those things require your brain to actually function in that moment and put effort. So that is your conscious brain now working. So when our minds go into a thought that we actually are not aware of, that's happening in our subconscious. So that thought, for example, here now, it could be that you are someone that's fearful of being late all the time. And that day you might have plans, and your brain subconsciously starts thinking, I'm going to be late because I'm always late. So we're so unaware of the thought actually happening. The subconscious is doing it without our actual conscious knowledge. And it causes us to react and respond. So it causes us then to have an emotion and a reaction and the physical symptoms of anxiety, which is then why we go, why is this happening to us? Okay. So just to give a little backlog there, when we are anxious, it's because the body has received information via a thought in our subconscious mind, and it's caused us to react and respond with physical symptoms or an emotion, such as feeling a certain way, pressured, stress, headache, sweaty palms, tight chest, and so forth, like we spoke about earlier. So try and dissect that as much as you can, because essentially, again, what we're doing is trying to understand where the anxiety comes from. So then in the future, we can use more of our conscious mind to put us in a place where we limit the amount of the subconscious brain happening and the thoughts that are lingering in there. And we're able to disconnect, so then we don't have that extreme feeling of the anxiety and the anxious symptoms. So just really quickly, I'm going to share here my screen, because I just want to run over a ebook that I've actually created for you guys. I have posted it already in our Discord chat group, so hopefully some of you guys may have seen it. This is one of the pages. As you can see, we've got our anxiety symptoms here that I've put. Some of them I've already said. Right, if we go here, our sympathetic nervous system. This is really, really interesting when it comes to how the body is responding to the brain. Okay, so in the time that we are feeling anxious, our sympathetic nervous system, okay, which is run by our brain, it starts to function in a way that limits other body functions. So, for example, when you are anxious and when you're in that state of fight or flight and survival mode, your body will start to limit things like the production of digestion. It will start to limit that, but then pump a lot more effort and a lot more energy in things like running your adrenaline. Okay, so it limits certain things of the body that it doesn't need whilst in a survival mode, and it does other things to start increasing the power in order for you to be receptive, in order for you to be alert, in order for you to action. And that's what's the survival and the fight or flight response. Okay, and that is where anxiety lies in our body. Okay, so if we are in a state of anxiety for most of our day, for most of our weeks, whatever it is, if our body is used to that, you are essentially limiting other functions for longer than they need to be. Okay, so you end up almost having symptoms. So you end up, for example, let me just go to this page. If you're in that sympathetic nervous system process for too long, the body will start to cause other problems. Okay, so this is a connection that a lot of us forget, because as an example, if you're somebody that's anxious quite a lot of the time, and later down the line you notice that you are not sleeping as best as you used to, or maybe you don't have much clarity in your brain, you're not really making the best decisions like you used to, you're starting to think really bad of yourself, you're starting to feel like you're insecure, you're starting to get more triggered. All of these things come from the body being in an imbalance for too long. So if that body is in that fight or flight for too long of a period, it's going to start causing other complications. And those things are physical and emotional. So if we look at the physical side, I've pointed out in these black dots, just as an example of where the physical problems start lying. So you might have pain in your limbs, in your tendons, in your joints. You might start to get panic attacks because your heart is tight, your chest is tight, it's been too tight for too long. I've actually put here irregular periods, because actually this is very, very much to do with anxiety as well, and stress. If you're tensing most of the time, especially when you're anxious, you're going to start tensing areas of the body, and they aren't able to function as best as they can and as calmly as they can. So the emotional side, you might start to experience things like you want to be more on your own. You become more introverted. You don't want to spend time with people anymore. You start having low self-esteem, start feeling like your behavior is becoming erratic. You might start to feel more headaches and sadness within yourself because of those pains. So anxiety goes so far extreme when you're in that place for too long of a period, and then it almost kind of just rolls into something else, and you no longer even have a connection to where it originated from.